You will learn how to express happiness, disappointment, anger, and excitement. And you will learn how to use the appropriate language to give and request advice, express and request obligation, and give and request permission. But before we get into this lesson, let's review your Lesson 1 challenge. In Lesson 1, you were challenged to practice your knowledge of formality. You had to convert the following sentence to have a more formal tone. $70 for a pair of jeans. What a rip-off. Now, this sentence would be socially acceptable in an informal setting, like while you are shopping with a close friend. But you can't say it in this way if the store owner can hear you. That would be quite rude and impolite. Let's look at a possible alternative. That doesn't quite suit my budget. This sentence is not only more formal, but it comes across as more polite than the previous version of the sentence. Happiness is the feeling you get when you are completely satisfied with your external reality or internal well-being. When we are happy, we tend to smile or laugh. Sometimes we want to express our happiness to the world. In other words, sometimes we want everyone around us to know that we feel happy about something. So, I'm about to teach you some phrases that will help you express yourself in such situations. Let's look at a scenario. You were just told that your sick grandmother has been discharged from the hospital and is now healthy. You now feel happy and relieved because you were initially worried about your grandmother, and now there is no need to worry anymore. In such a situation, you can say, "Thank goodness." Now, this would be one of those instances where the literal meaning of the sentence differs from the purpose or point of the sentence. If you say this phrase, you're not actually saying thank you to anyone. It's just an expression we use to express relief and happiness. Another phrase you can use is, "That's great news." Now, this phrase is quite self-explanatory. You can use it to show that you consider the news you just heard to be good. Yet another phrase you can use is, "What a relief." This one is also quite self-explanatory. You can use it to show that you are relieved to hear this news. Of course, you can use the three phrases in conjunction with one another if you really want to express your happiness quite clearly. You can say, "Thank goodness, that is great news. What a relief." Let's consider another scenario. You're having a lovely, calm, and satisfactory day today. Your friend asks you, "How are you today?" You can say to your friend, "I'm great." This is a simple way to say that you're doing well. Note that it doesn't mean "I am a great person." It simply means "I am doing well and feeling happy." Now, if you are really happy, you can say, "I'm on cloud 9. This is an expression that means that you are in a state of bliss or extreme happiness. Obviously, it doesn't literally mean that you are on a cloud. That sounds fun, but also impossible. And if you are extremely happy, you can even say, "I'm on top of the world." This expression means a similar thing to "I'm on cloud 9. It means that you are really happy and blissful. You will probably find yourself in some situations in which you might need to express disappointment. Disappointment is what you feel when you hear bad news or when you come across something that doesn't quite meet your expectations. Let's look at some phrases you can use in such situations. Here is a scenario in which you may feel quite disappointed. You have plans to eat dinner at your favorite restaurant, but when you arrive, you notice that the restaurant is closed. You can say, "Oh no." You might remember this phrase from Module 1 when you learned about interjections. It's quite a simple and effective way to express your disappointment. You can also say, "That's a bummer." This is an informal phrase, so please don't use this phrase in formal settings like business meetings, etc. You can also say, "That sucks." Now this is also an informal phrase. Only use it in informal contexts. Another emotion you may need to express is anger, though I hope you don't need to express it too often. Anger is what you feel when you are deeply upset with somebody's behavior or a specific situation. In situations where you feel angry, it's usually not socially acceptable to overtly express your anger. Remember politeness strategies from the last lesson? You'll need to use some politeness strategies so that you don't come across as too angry. It's important to communicate your feelings, but in some situations, it may be best to avoid expressing emotions such as anger. However, if you are with a close friend or family member and you need to communicate your feelings with them, there are some polite phrases you can use to bring the message across. Let's look at this scenario. Your roommate has left a mess in the kitchen. This is not the first time. It angers you because you prefer a clean kitchen. Imagine piles and piles of dirty dishes and unclean surfaces. If you're someone who likes a clean space, that might make you feel a little angry or at least irritated. In such a situation, it is acceptable to confront your roommate, but it's important to do so politely to avoid coming across as rude. You can simply say, "Would you mind cleaning up after yourself, please?" This phrase converts a demand into a kind request. Remember to say please for added politeness and to emphasize that this is a polite request, not a demand. You can also say, "Next time, will you please clean up when you're finished in the kitchen?" Again, this is a request and not a demand. The use of the word please is very important here. Another phrase you can use is, "Perhaps let's try to keep our kitchen space clean." On that note, think back to the last lesson. In the sentence, "Perhaps let's try to keep our kitchen space clean," what politeness strategy is used? Do you remember? Inclusion is the politeness strategy used here. Inclusion is the strategic use of pronouns to make a request seem like a collaborative act. Remember, let's is a contraction of let us, and the pronouns us and we are inclusive because they involve you and the other person. The next emotion is excitement. I hope that this is an emotion that you'll have many opportunities to express in your upcoming adventures. Excitement is the emotion you feel when you look forward to something good happening. I will now teach you some useful phrases that you can use in such situations. Your friend asks you how you feel about an upcoming birthday party. You are very excited for your party. You can say, I can't wait for my party, or simply, I can't wait. This is a very common expression that means you are very excited for an upcoming event. Another phrase you can use is, I'm dying to throw my party. The phrase, I'm dying to, always needs to be followed by the thing you are excited for. You can't simply say, I'm dying. That will be hugely misinterpreted. Another phrase is, I'm looking forward to my party. Or you can simply say, I'm looking forward to it. You cannot simply say, I'm looking forward. You have to say what you're looking forward to, even if you just use the word it. Apart from expressing emotions, another function of language is to give or request advice. Advice is what we tell our friends or family to do in difficult situations. It is a form of support that we give to our friends and family when they most need it. You can also give and receive advice in more formal settings. For example, a financial advisor would give you advice about how to budget correctly. In this core topic, you will learn how to give advice and you will learn how to ask for advice. Like I mentioned before, giving advice is a form of support, and you will likely find yourself in situations where your friends or family members, or perhaps even colleagues, will ask you for advice. Consider the following scenario. Your friend is struggling to find a job. He needs you to give him advice. Can you think of some things your friend can do to improve his chances of finding a job? Well, perhaps your friend can buy some formal clothing so that he can look neat and well prepared for any possible job interviews. Perhaps your friend can also take an online course. As I'm sure you know, online course diplomas look great on a CV. Another thing your friend can do to improve his chances of finding a job is to improve his CV. Perhaps his CV is full of spelling errors and doesn't look appealing to potential employers. So, now that we have come up with some advice for your friend, let's word it properly. Here are some useful phrases you can use when giving someone advice. These are only the beginnings of the sentences. You'd have to insert the actual advice in the correct ways. Let's start with, you'd better buy formal clothing. If you choose to use this type of phrase to give advice, the form of the sentence would be, you'd better, plus the present simple form of the verb phrase, which is simply buy formal clothing. If you would like a recap on tenses like present simple, you can refer to our Module 1 Lesson 6, which was all about the different tenses. Note that using the phrase you'd better can come across as quite forceful or urgent. Now let's look at the next phrase you can use when giving advice. If I were you, I'd take an online course. The form of this phrase would be, if I were you, I'd, plus the present simple form of the verb phrase, which in this case is take an online course. This phrase tells your friend that you are imagining yourself in his situation and what you would do if you were in his situation. Let's look at another useful phrase for giving advice. You should improve your CV. The form of this phrase would be you should plus the present simple form of the verb phrase, which in this case is improve your CV. This is a very common advice-giving phrase that simply tells your friend what a good option for him would be. Now you know how to give advice, but sometimes you might need to ask for some advice too. Here's how you can ask for advice. So, naturally, you'd start by explaining the issue or complicated situation you find yourself in. After you've explained your dilemma, you can say one of the following phrases to request advice. Firstly, you can ask, "What should I do?" This is quite a clear way to ask for advice. Another phrase you can use is, "What do you think?" Use this phrase when you want advice or even just your friend's opinion about the situation, in case you want a second opinion about something. Another useful phrase is, "How should I approach this?" Now, this is a formal phrase. You could use it in a business setting to ask for advice about a particular dilemma you are dealing with in the workplace. Coming up in Lesson 3, you are going to learn about the building blocks of sentences. This lesson will help you with your writing abilities. You will learn how to build different types of sentences, and this will help you to write more cohesively. So I look forward to seeing you at the next lesson. Another function for which we can use language is to request or express obligation. In other words, telling someone that they must do something, or asking someone if you must do something. The word must indicates that there is obligation. If there is something you must do, it means that it's compulsory and you are strictly required to do it. Can you think of some compulsory actions? In other words, some actions that you are strictly required to do, actions that are necessary. Well, if you're a working professional, it's necessary to go to work. If you're in school, it's necessary to go to school. When you are driving, it's necessary to stop at a red traffic light. So, let's talk about expressing obligation. In other words, telling someone that it's necessary or strictly required for them to do something. The word must is one word we use to show that something is strictly necessary. For example, you can say, "You must go to work." "You must go to school." And "You must stop at a red traffic light." You can also use have to interchangeably. So, in most contexts, it doesn't matter if you use must or have to. They both express obligation. For example, you can say, "You have to go to work." "You have to go to school." And "You have to stop at a red traffic light." You might also want to request or ask for obligation in situations where you are unsure about what is required of you. When it comes to the phrases must and have to, you can simply convert them into question form if you want to request obligation instead of expressing obligation. In the case of must, in order to convert it into a question, you simply move the word must to the beginning of the sentence and then add a question mark. For example, must I go to work? Must I go to school? And must I stop at a red traffic light? In the case of have to, you simply keep the sentence as it is, but add the word do to the beginning of the sentence and add a question mark. For example, do I have to go to work? Do I have to go to school? And do I have to stop at a red traffic light? I have a question for you. What is the difference between giving advice and expressing obligation? Remember, advice would be you should improve your CV, whereas an obligation would be you must improve your CV. The difference is that advice is a suggestion, whereas an obligation is a strict requirement. So, saying the sentence, you must improve your CV, when you are intending to give advice, would come across as quite harsh and impolite. So, when you are giving advice, be careful and make sure you are not accidentally expressing permission. When you give someone permission, it means that you tell them that they are allowed to do something. Let's talk about expressing permission. Some people argue that the word can should be used to express ability and not permission. But the fact of the matter is that the modal verb can is the most commonly used modal verb to express permission. It is rather informal though. For example, you can call me tomorrow morning. You can borrow my book. You can come to my house. Now, may is a much more formal modal verb to express permission. For example, you may call me tomorrow morning. You may borrow my book. You may come to my house. Could is another modal verb that can be used to express permission, but it sounds like a suggestion at the same time. You could call me tomorrow morning. You could borrow my book. You could come to my house. You can use could to give permission when the sentence also serves as a suggestion. Also, take note of the pronunciation of could. You do not pronounce the letter L in the word could. You will also find yourself in situations where you need to request or ask for permission to do something. As with obligation, you'd simply convert the permission sentences into questions. Doing so is quite simple. You'd simply move the modal verb, can, may, or could, to the beginning of the sentence, and then add a question mark. An optional extra is to add the word please to the end of the sentence for politeness. Of course, if you are requesting something from someone, you want to sound as polite as possible. So I'd strongly recommend using the word please. So you can say, can, may, or could I call you tomorrow morning, please? Can, may, or could I borrow your book, please? Can, may, or could I come to your house, please? In this lesson, your friend is very sick. It seems like she has the flu. Write a few sentences giving her advice on how to relieve her flu symptoms. For example, have soup and drink ginger and lemon tea. This challenge will help you to practice giving advice using the correct sentence structures.